What's up, guys? This is Chris from DraftDashboard.com. Here are my DFS picks for NBA Monday, February 15th. These picks apply for DraftKings and FanDuel. Before I get started, please drop a like on this video and hit that red subscribe button and hit that bell icon so you don't miss our new videos. In this video, I'm going to go over my top picks for today's NBA slate. And if you stick around to the very end of this video, we'll use the Draft Dashboard tools to make a DFS lineup using the picks we just made. Okay guys, let's take a look at the point guard position. I'm going to give you a value play here, especially on FanDuel. I love this FanDuel value play. I like Tomas Satoransky from the Chicago Bulls playing the Indiana Pacers, who have a middle-of-the-pack defense overall, and although they've been pretty good versus opposing point guards, Tomas Satoransky has averaged 17.6 fantasy points per game on the season, playing an average of 19 minutes per game with a 14% usage rate. He scored 31, 14, and 24 fantasy points in the last 3 games, playing 29, 19, and 23 minutes. He's projected at 19.7 fantasy points here tonight. That's 5.1 times value. He's only $3,900 FanDuel salary, but he is $700 more on DraftKings. So I love that FanDuel price. Probably a FanDuel only play for me. And Vegas thinks there's going to be 228 points scored in this game. And take a look at this. Tomas Satoransky has scored 30, 24, 26, 25, and 29 fantasy points in his last 5 games versus the Indiana Pacers. So that is fantastic player versus team history, especially on FanDuel where he's only $3,900 FanDuel salary. So I like Tomas Satoransky here versus the Indiana Pacers. Okay, a nice mid-range play here. I like Derrick Rose from the New York Knicks playing the Atlanta Hawks, who have the 11th worst defense overall, and they give up the absolute most fantasy points to opposing point guards. Derrick Rose has averaged 25.6 fantasy points per game on the season, playing an average of 22 minutes per game with a 30% usage rate. He scored 21, 37, and 24 fantasy points in the last 3 games, playing 22, 19, and 20 minutes. He's projected at 24.6 fantasy points here tonight. That's 4.8 times value. He's $5,100 FanDuel salary and $200 less on DraftKings. So I like that DraftKings price. Vegas thinks there's going to be 216.5 points scored in this game. And Derrick Rose has scored 22, 45, 20, and 30 fantasy points in his last 4 games versus the Atlanta Hawks. It's not a back-to-back. It's a fantastic matchup. He should be good to go. I think he hits value no problem here. So I like Derrick Rose here versus the Atlanta Hawks. Okay, let's take a look at the shooting guard position. I like Seth Curry from the Philadelphia 76ers playing the Utah Jazz, who have a good defense overall, and they've been good versus opposing shooting guards, but Seth Curry has averaged 21 fantasy points per game on the season, playing an average of 28 minutes per game with a 17% usage rate. He scored 14, 23, and 27 fantasy points in the last 3 games, playing 34, 34, and 29 minutes. Now, his production hasn't been great the past couple of games, but he has played 34 minutes in the past 2 games, so I think that's encouraging, and that's the main reason that I like this pick. He's projected at 20.7 fantasy points here tonight. That's 5.1 times value. He's only $4,100 FanDuel salary, but he is $600 more on DraftKings, so I love that FanDuel price. Vegas thinks there's going to be 227.5 points scored in this game, and Seth Curry has scored 25, 24, in 33 fantasy points in his last 3 games versus the Utah Jazz. So I like Seth Curry here versus the Utah Jazz. Okay, another shooting guard that I like is Eric Gordon from the Houston Rockets playing the Washington Wizards, who have the 3rd worst defense overall, and they give up the 2nd most fantasy points to opposing shooting guards. Eric Gordon has averaged 26.9 fantasy points per game on the season, playing an average of 29 minutes per game with a 25% usage rate. He scored 41, 24, and 28 fantasy points in the last 3 games, playing 34, 30, and 33 minutes. He's projected at 29.1 fantasy points here tonight. That's 4.7 times value. He's 6,200 FanDuel salary and 200 more on DraftKings. Vegas thinks there's going to be 228.5 points scored in this game. So we got a high-scoring game, a fast-paced game, and a fantastic matchup. So I like Eric Gordon here versus the Washington Wizards. Okay, let's take a look at the small forward position. I'm going to give you a value play here. I like Danny Green from the Philadelphia 76ers playing the Utah Jazz, who have a good defense overall, and they've been good versus opposing small forwards, but Danny Green has averaged 20.1 fantasy points per game on the season, playing an average of 28 minutes per game with a 14% usage rate. He scored 23, 15, and 7 fantasy points in the last 3 games, playing 30, 31, and 27 minutes. So you can see he's got a low floor. He's got a pretty high ceiling for his price point. He's projected at 20.1 fantasy points here tonight. That's 5.4 times value. He's only 3,700 FanDuel salary and 400 more on DraftKings. So I like that price on both sites. Vegas thinks there's going to be 227.5 points scored in this game. You never really know what you're going to get with Danny Green. If his 3 ball is falling, he's going to have a good game, but he can throw up bricks, and when that happens, he can ruin a lineup. So he's a high risk, high reward play here, but his salary is low enough on FanDuel, he doesn't need all that much to hit value. So I like Danny Green here versus the Utah Jazz. Real quick, guys, I got great news. For a limited time, we're offering a full 30-day trial to Draft Dashboard. You can try all of our DFS tools for all sports. You can try the Position Optimizer, where you can see the top players ranked for each position. And we added a new Player Trends tool, where you can see the top salary differences between FanDuel and DraftKings. It's a really good tool to help you pick out value for the site that you're playing on. Oh, and if you're tired of doing research every day, we just added a cheat sheet that shows hand-picked plays for the slate. No confusing stat lines, no headaches, just a simple cheat sheet that shows the absolute best players for your lineups. Okay, now this is a FanDuel play for me only. This guy always seems to burn me every time I play him, but I do like him on FanDuel. I like Joe Ingles from the Utah Jazz playing the Philadelphia 76ers, who have a good defense overall, and they're middle of the pack defending opposing small forwards. Joe Ingles has averaged 22.5 fantasy points per game on the season, playing an average of 26 minutes per game with a 16% usage rate. He scored 22, 36, and 36 fantasy points in the last 3 games, playing 32, 29, and 35 minutes. He's projected at 24.7 fantasy points here tonight. That's 5 times value. He's 4,900 FanDuel salary, but he's 800 more on DraftKings. So I love that FanDuel price. FanDuel only play for me. And Vegas thinks there's going to be 227.5 points scored in this game. And Joe Ingles has scored 38, 21, 20, 30, and 11 fantasy points in his last 5 games versus the 76ers. But you can see on FanDuel, he only needs about 25 fantasy points to get you 5 times value. And he's got that 35 plus fantasy point upside. And he's playing a bunch of minutes, playing a ton of minutes every game. So I like Joe Ingles here versus the Philadelphia 76ers. Okay, let's take a look at the power forward position. I'm going to pay up at the power forward position, so I like Bam Adebayo from the Miami Heat playing the LA Clippers, who have a good defense overall, and they've been good versus opposing power forwards, but Bam Adebayo has averaged 41.3 fantasy points per game on the season, playing an average of 33 minutes per game with a 25% usage rate. He scored 40, 36, and 38 fantasy points in his last 3 games, playing 36, 33, and 35 minutes. He's projected at 41.8 fantasy points here tonight. That's 4.8 times value. He's 8,700 FanDuel salary and 400 less on DraftKings. So I like that DraftKings price. Vegas thinks there's going to be 220.5 points scored in this game, and Bam has scored 44, 48, and 40 fantasy points in his last 3 games versus the Clippers. So I like Bam Adebayo here versus the LA Clippers. Another power forward that I like is Julius Randle from the New York Knicks playing the Atlanta Hawks, who have the 11th worst defense overall, and although they've been pretty good versus opposing power forwards, Julius Randle has averaged 43.9 fantasy points per game on the season, playing an average of 37 minutes per game with a 28% usage rate. He scored 38, 51, and 29 fantasy points in the last 3 games, playing 33, 32, and 36 minutes. He's projected at 43.2 fantasy points here tonight. That's 5 times value. He's 8,600 FanDuel salary and 100 more on DraftKings. Julius Randle has scored 58, 54, and 61 fantasy points in his last 3 games versus the Atlanta Hawks. So I like that player versus team history. So I like Julius Randle here versus the Atlanta Hawks. Okay, moving on to the center position. I love this DraftKings play. I like Rudy Gobert from the Utah Jazz playing the Philadelphia 76ers, who have a good defense overall, and they've been good versus opposing centers, but Rudy Gobert has averaged 39.7 fantasy points per game on the season, playing an average of 30 minutes per game with an 18% usage rate. He scored 37, 51, and 42 fantasy points in the last 3 games, playing 30, 34, and 36 minutes. He's projected at 40.8 fantasy points here tonight. That's 4.9 times value. He's 8,300 FanDuel salary, but he's 1,100 less on DraftKings. So I love that DraftKings price. Vegas thinks there's going to be 227.5 points scored in this game, and Rudy Gobert has scored 52, 50, and 46 fantasy points in his last 3 games versus the 76ers. So he's got good player versus team history. That DraftKings price is just way too low. One of my favorite plays on the slate on DraftKings. So I like Rudy Gobert here versus the Philadelphia 76ers. Okay, another center that I like is Demarcus Cousins from the Houston Rockets playing the Washington Wizards, who have the 2nd worst defense overall, and they give up the 3rd most fantasy points to opposing centers. Demarcus Cousins has averaged 24.9 fantasy points per game on the season, playing an average of 20 minutes per game with a 24% usage rate. He scored 24, 36, and 20 fantasy points in his last 3 games, playing 21, 24, and 22 minutes. He's projected at 28.3 fantasy points here tonight. That's 4.6 times value. He's 6,100 FanDuel salary and 100 more on DraftKings. Vegas thinks there's going to be 228.5 points scored in this game, and I like this pick because Demarcus Cousins scored 51, and 30 fantasy points in his last 2 games versus the Washington Wizards. It's a fast-paced game, a fantastic matchup, so I like Demarcus Cousins here versus the Washington Wizards. If you want to try all these daily fantasy tools for yourself, click the link in the description below this video or just go to draftdashboard.com. You can use our DFS lineup optimizer to build quality lineups using our picks and your own custom player pool. Click the link in the description below this video and try all these daily fantasy tools right now. Thanks so much for watching. Oh, and don't forget to subscribe to this channel and hit that bell icon so you can get instant updates whenever we post a new video. Thank you so much for watching, everyone. If you enjoyed this video, please smiggity smash that like button and subscribe to the channel if you haven't already. Oh, and please comment below with your favorite player for this NBA slate. I love to hear what you guys have to think. Thanks again, and good luck.